All right, everyone get ready because we're going deep on this one, diving into Oz.
Wow.
But not the one you might be thinking of. Not the classic Wizard of Oz,
Right, right.
you know, all happy and skipping down the yellow brick road. This is Gregory Maguire's Wicked.
Oh, yeah. This is different.
You guys sent in some material on this, and wow, this one's, it's dark, it's complex.
Yeah, it really is.
It's like everything you thought you knew about Oz flipped on its head.
Maguire takes what we think we know about Oz and really turns it upside down.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating prequel, but also a really sharp commentary.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to unpack today. So first off, Maguire doesn't just like wave a wand and poof, there's Oz. It's like he builds a whole society.
He does a whole world. It's got all this political intrigue, a very strict class system, even regional differences.
So it's like Oz got real, you know. What do you think about that? What do you think about that change?
It's a huge contrast. I mean, if you think about Baum's Oz,
Right.
very straightforward. You know, you had good witches, you had bad witches, and that was kind of it. Maguire's Oz is completely different. He makes the Emerald City this place of privilege, like the elite live there. And then you have places like Munchkin Land.
Yeah.
They're forgotten. They're neglected. That creates all these problems for people.
And that's where Nesseros comes in, right?
Right.
Elphaba's sister.
Yeah.
And she ends up ruling Munchkin Land.
She does.
But she's kind of ruling it with an iron fist.
Yeah.
I was really surprised to see her go from this innocent girl to kind of this harsh ruler. What do you make of that transformation?
Well, you know, I think it's a classic case of good intentions gone bad.
Yeah.
And Maguire uses her story to really explore how power can corrupt.
Right.
I mean, Nesseros starts out wanting to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But as she gets more and more power, she becomes controlling. And eventually she creates this regime that's based on fear and this really strict religious dogma.
It is a little unsettling to think about how someone can start off wanting to do good and then end up becoming,
A tyrant.
yeah, like a tyrant.
Yeah,
And it really does make you think about like historical leaders who maybe went down a similar path.
it does.
Yeah.
It really makes you stop and think about how easily power can corrupt, even with the best of intentions. You know, sometimes the people who set out to help can become the oppressors.
Yeah. Wow. And speaking of powerful figures, we got to talk about the wizard himself.
Of course, the wizard.
Maguire's wizard is nothing like that bumbling, harmless guy from the original Wizard of Oz.
Right. Not at all.
I mean, this wizard is calculated.
Manipulative.
He's scary.
He really is. I mean, if the original wizard's a trickster, this wizard's a master puppeteer.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the most disturbing things he does is how he targets the animals of Oz.
Yes.
And not just like regular animals. We're talking sentient beings.
Right. They can think.
They can talk.
But to the wizard, they're nothing.
They're second-class citizens. And he takes away all their rights and forces them to hide who they are.
It's just heartbreaking to read about. It is. And this is one of the most powerful parts of Maguire's commentary. He uses what happens to the animals to expose how prejudice and discrimination work in societies. You know, it doesn't matter if it's a real society or one he made up. The same patterns are there.
Yeah, it's like a blueprint for how to discriminate, you know?
It is. Find a difference between people, make it seem like a really big difference, make people afraid, and then all of a sudden you can justify treating an entire group of people like they're less than human.
Yeah. And it makes you think about all the ways that prejudice plays out in the real world, too. You know, throughout history and even today, certain groups have been targeted and dehumanized based on their race or their religion or even just their ideas.
Exactly. It happens over and over again. And Maguire's showing us that it can even happen in Oz, which seems like a magical place, you know?
Right. It's like he's saying that no place is immune to this kind of cruelty.
Right? Even in a fantasy world like Oz, those seeds of prejudice can take root. They can grow. It's a powerful reminder that we always have to be on guard against people who want to divide us. We have to protect everyone's rights. It doesn't matter if they're different from us.
Okay, so we've talked about the not-so-wonderful side of Oz and its leader, but let's talk about the character at the center of it all, Elphaba.
The Wicked Witch.
Yeah, the so-called Wicked Witch, Maguire's version of her is...
She's complex.
She's so complex. He gives her a backstory.
She's got motivations.
Yeah, she's got depth, and it challenges everything we thought we knew about her.
He turns her into this anti-heroine. She's not evil. She's a product of the world she lives in. The prejudice she faces makes her who she is. And she's got this really strong sense of justice.
Yeah, and she doesn't take anything from anyone.
She questions authority. She fights for anyone who's being treated badly. And she doesn't care what anyone thinks of her.
And her green skin.
Right.
It's like the most powerful symbol of how she's different.
It makes her a target.
Yeah, an instant target. It's
Yeah.
amazing how Maguire takes something so simple like skin color and uses it to explore how people fear and reject anyone who's different from them. It's like he's saying prejudice can come from anywhere.
It's a visual metaphor. Green skin represents all the ways we make people feel like outsiders.
Wow.
And Elphaba, she wants people to accept her for who she is,
Right.
not what she looks like.
Of course.
And that struggle to be accepted, that resonates with anyone who's ever felt like they don't belong.
It's a powerful reminder that prejudice can start with something as basic as how you look. And with Elphaba, it shapes her whole life. It influences how people see her, and it pushes her to fight against all the unfairness in Oz. It's fascinating how Maguire shows how society can mold a person, even make them become the thing they're told they are.
Yeah. It makes you ask, is Elphaba really wicked? Or did people just decide she was?
Right.
And if you're told you're wicked over and over again, do you start to believe it, even if it's not true?
That's a really thought-provoking idea. It really makes you think about labels and how they can affect how we see ourselves and other people.
They have a lot of power, that's for sure.
Definitely. So before we get too philosophical here, let's look closer at how discrimination is everywhere in Wicked.
It's not just Elphaba.
No, it's woven into Ozian society.
Yes, it is a systemic problem.
Yeah.
You see it with the animals especially. They don't have basic rights. They have to hide who they are.
And that's where the connection to the real world is so clear, right?
It is. What happens to the animals is like all the struggles of marginalized groups who have been denied rights and opportunities just because of who they are or what they believe.
And that fight for equality?
It's not over.
No, not at all. Not in fiction and not in real life.
Maguire doesn't shy away from showing how awful discrimination is.
Yeah.
What it does to people, what it does to communities. He's challenging us to look at our own world
Yeah.
and ask ourselves, are we really living up to those ideals of equality and justice?
That's a great point. Wow. This is a lot to think about. And I feel like we've only scratched the surface of Wicked.
Oh, yeah. There's so much more.
So much more to discuss, so stay tuned because in part 2, we're going to go even deeper into Maguire's world.
We'll be back.
We're going to talk about otherness.
More about the animals
We'll talk about religion in Oz.
and what it really means to be wicked.
So stick with us. And we're back, digging deeper into Wicked. And one of the things that really struck me about this book is how this idea of otherness is everywhere. It's like Maguire took all the ways people can be pushed aside, excluded, marginalized,
Yeah.
and he put a spotlight right on them.
It's fascinating because it's not just about being different, right? It's about how those differences are used to create these power structures.
Okay.
Who's on top, who's on bottom.
Yeah, so it's not just like, oh, you're green or you're an animal. It's how those things get twisted into something bad by people in power.
Exactly. Like with the animals, they're smart. They can think for themselves.
Right.
But the wizard and the people in charge, they make the animals seem dangerous. Like they're not even really people. It's all just to justify treating them terribly.
And that's something we see all the time in history, right?
All the time.
When people want to hold on to power.
It's like a classic move.
Yeah.
Find something different about a group of people.
Make it a big deal.
Make everyone scared of them. Then you can tell yourself it's okay to treat them like they're less than you.
And that's where Elphaba's story becomes so powerful. She knows what it feels like to be the other.
She's been an outsider her whole life.
Yeah. Because of her green skin, she gets it. She understands the animals and what they're going through.
It's like her own experience being judged and labeled. That's what drives her to fight for others who are being treated the same way.
She's like this champion for anyone who's been pushed down, ignored, told they don't matter.
She is, and she doesn't let anyone stop her.
It adds a whole other dimension to the story, don't you think? It's not just good versus evil anymore.
So Fred there. It's much bigger than that.
It's about fighting for equality, standing up against prejudice, having the guts to do what's right even when it's scary.
It's about giving a voice to the voiceless, the
Yep.
people who have been silenced.
Exactly. And that brings us to another big part of Wicked religion.
Ah, religion.
Maguire doesn't shy away from showing how religion can be a good thing.
Comforting.
Right, but also how it can be used to control people and hurt them.
It's not just about faith. It's about how people can twist religious ideas to justify being cruel.
Like with Elphaba's father.
Her own father.
He's so religious, but he sees her green skin and he thinks she's evil.
He thinks it's a sign from the devil,
And that makes him blind to how good she really is.
and it pushes her away.
It's so sad. It shows how even something as personal as faith can be distorted and used to judge people,
Yeah.
to say they're not good enough.
And it's not just him. You see it all over Oz.
Yeah.
People using religion to grab power and keep it.
Think about Nessaros.
Right. She goes from this loving sister to a tyrant, practically.
And it's all driven by this rigid, harsh view of religion. It's like Maguire's saying religion's a powerful tool. It can be used for good or for bad.
It can bring people together, or it can tear them apart.
It can lead to compassion and understanding.
Or it can be used to justify the worst kinds of behavior.
Yeah, and Wicked doesn't tell us what to think about it. It just shows us how complicated it is, how it's all tangled up with power and prejudice and who we are.
It's a lot to consider.
It really is. It's like Maguire takes all these ideas about good and bad, right and wrong, faith and reason.
And he shakes them all up. Makes you question everything.
And that's what makes Wicked so amazing.
It's not a simple fairy tale.
No, it's a story that makes you think hard, makes you confront things that are uncomfortable.
And maybe understand human nature a little better.
It's not always easy to read,
It can be challenging.
but it's worth it. And that's why this deep dive is so cool. We're not just rehashing the plot.
Right, we're going deeper.
We're looking at the big ideas.
Connecting it to the real world.
Yeah, and hopefully learning something about ourselves and the world around us.
It's about seeing that the line between wicked and good, it's not always so clear.
Right.
And judging people based on labels,
Yeah.
that could be dangerous.
And as we head into the last part of our deep dive, I think we're going to see how all these themes come together in Elphaba's story.
Her fate.
Yeah, her ultimate fate. Stay tuned, because things are about to get really interesting. Okay, so we're back. And we're wrapping up our deep dive into Wicked. We've talked about a lot of heavy stuff.
How prejudice.
Yeah, but I think it all kind of leads up to how Maguire reimagines Elphaba, the so-called Wicked Witch.
Yeah.
He really makes us rethink what we think we know about villains.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about giving her a sad backstory or a few good qualities. I mean, he completely changes how we think about wickedness.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder where that label even comes from, you know? Who decides who's good and who's evil?
Right. Like, is it even possible to say someone's just plain wicked?
That's what he's getting at. It's all about perspective.
Yeah.
You know, and who has the power.
I see.
Throughout the book, we see Elphaba getting judged, condemned by people in charge. And they call her wicked just because she doesn't follow the rules. She questions things. She speaks her mind.
And that's what makes her dangerous to them.
Exactly. She's a threat because she won't be quiet.
So it's not even about what she does. It's about how it makes them look bad.
Right. It's easier to call her wicked than to actually listen to her.
Wow. And the way Maguire sets up the story is so clever.
As a prequel,
Yeah, we already know what's supposed to happen.
we think we know the ending.
Elphaba's the villain.
But he shows us her whole journey,
Her struggles.
why she makes the choices she does.
And it makes you wonder, did things really have to end that way? Was she really that wicked?
Exactly. He's saying don't just take things at face value. Look closer.
Yeah, and maybe the villain of the story isn't actually the villain.
Right. And that's what makes this book so powerful.
It makes you think,
It's not just a retelling. It's about questioning authority
going against what everyone expects you to do.
and understanding that good and evil, they're not always so black and white.
It's about trying to understand people, even the ones we think are bad.
And realizing that maybe they have their own reasons for doing things.
And maybe they're not so different from us after all.
Because we all have that potential for good and bad inside us.
That's a really deep thought. It's like saying there's no such thing as someone who's just born wicked.
Right. We all make choices.
And those choices.
They make us who we are. They affect other people. And it's up to us to decide what kind of impact we want to have.
Wow. That's heavy stuff. So every time you hear someone being called wicked,
Think about Elphaba
remember her story? Her struggles.
and all those layers Maguire shows us.
Because maybe
Just maybe.
there's more to their story than you think.
And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from Wicked.
Yeah, look beyond the labels.
Try to understand people.
And don't just believe everything you're told.
Question the stories you've always believed.
That's a great way to wrap up this deep dive into Wicked.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We hope you enjoyed it. And keep thinking about these ideas even after the episode is over.